It shows that Carney is more interested in pleasing Beijing because they lent him $250 million for his company.
Oh, something's funny here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we got dueling events here. We've got Pierre in Fredrickton, New Brunswick, and we've got Mark Carney in Georgetown, Ontario. Pierre's drawing huge crowds in a big building. Mark Carney can barely fill a pub. Something is funny here. We also have the Paul Chang situation blowing up finally into mainstream media news here. Let's jump into this. So first up, we got a poll coming from MQO Research. This one's showing 46% for the Liberals and 34% for the Conservatives. This is absolutely absurd. And after looking this up here, this is the only one. This is the first time I've seen this. So is this another liberal establishment with dirty polling data? What I have found is this company does market-based research out of Atlantic Canada, which we already know is highly liberal. What's also highly liberal is this article from 2009, February 24th, where we've got Brendan Somerhalder, the president of the party's Radisson Constituency Association, has proposed an amendment to the party constitution to allow a leadership review later this year. So first off, you're wondering, who's this guy? If we jump over to MQO Research and go to the Meet the Team page, there's the president, Brendan Somerhalder of MQO Research. So just simply looking at his comments here on this page, he's a liberal. Conversations with current and past members of the Manitoba Liberal Party have revealed a far-reaching disillusionment with the party. He goes on to talk about how he wants to revitalize the party, revitalize the image with Manitobans, given the lack of success in the last 3 consecutive general elections. This is going back 2009. It's necessary for the party to engage in some sort of form of renewal. This guy's a liberal. So I'm guessing, I haven't gone through all these people, but the president of this company doing this poll is a liberal. And when you start going through all of them, most of these polling companies are liberal-based companies, sadly. Angus Reid is one of the few that is not. Conservative-leaning polling company. And really, none of these companies should be leaning any direction. They should just put out honest data. If we hadn't have honest data, what's the point of even having them? The liberal government funds these companies. They put out garbage, which then sways public opinion. This is draconian crap. Our country is being run like some sort of lukewarm version of China. Moving on, before I pop my top, we've got Concerned Canadian posting this one here. So this is Nanos tracking. Just look at this, showing 47% for Carney, 32% for Pierre, and 4% for Jagmeet. We got the Bloc at 2%, below the Greens and the PPC. I'm not buying this. What's the point of these polls anymore? Nothing here is accurate. I mean, we're about to show you Pierre Poilievre is having huge numbers of people come out to his rallies, where Mark Carney can barely fill a bar. As Sheila says, disregard the polls, they're corrupted. I mean, look at this one. Terry Newman posting this. What do you immediately notice about this poll? If we look at it, so Liberals 41%, Conservatives 37%, but if we look at the N equals 1,182 people, look at the age ranges here. 158 for the youth, 291 for this age range, 35 to 54, and 733 people for the 55 plus. No wonder these polls are skewed. Not to mention, Conservatives are not picking up the phones. They're not answering web surveys. There's a bias in their built as well. Not to mention the age ranges they're picking have more liberal voters. Next up, we got Jagmeet saying, you didn't solve the housing crisis, you caused it. This is true. The Liberals did, but so did you, Jagmeet. This is ridiculous, man. We got Mark Carney coming out with his new housing plan. He's just like Justin Trudeau, is going to magically invent a bunch of new houses. Right now, 240,000 houses get built per year, and he says 500,000 per year are going to get built. How? He's going to throw a bunch of money at it, just like Justin Trudeau. And guess what? It didn't work, and leaked papers prove that. This clip is funny. So this is inside the bar. I'll show you outside comparing the numbers here after this, but look at this. So this lady on the right here, she introduces him, and either she doesn't see him or doesn't want to shake his hand. I don't know. It's awkward though.
Under your leadership and your experience, we are so looking forward to building Canada strong with you. Thank you. Everyone.
Yeah, that's basically it. The wobblehead needs a looped GIF so bad right now. Why was his head trying to get away? Next up, we've got Pierre Poilievre in Fredrickton in New Brunswick. Look at this rally compared to Mark Carney's event at a bar. Okay, so I have to mute that once again. Copyright music, but you can see here, just packing every single room he goes to. It doesn't matter where he goes to. Everyone's coming out. The polls it's being manipulated. The image is being manipulated by all these liberal pollsters. It's disgraceful what's going on in our country. They're trying to sway people just by simply changing the narrative of what's going on. It's not working, though. The people are voting conservative. We're going to get our country back. And this is proof of it. Every single room is packed. In contrast here, here's Mark Carney's event. Look at this pathetic lineup. That's it. 40, 50 people into a bar. Maybe filled to the gills, 60, 70 people? I don't know. Not much. It wasn't even packed all the way up to the door. We got Ezra Levant on scene here, absolutely grilling Carney the second he stepped off his bus.
Did Paul Chang commit a crime? Mr. Carney did.
So if you look at the crowd here, yeah, maybe there's 60 people, maybe 70 max.
Mr. Chang commit a crime? Did Paul Chang commit a crime? Mr. Carney! I'm just vocalizing. I'm a...
So even if the bar is packed and these are people outside, say give them benefit of the doubt, there's 150 people. Comparing that to this, every single rally Pierre puts up is thousands of people. Meanwhile, we've got Mark Carney here getting a photo op of pouring himself a stumbling juice. Congratulations. He's a man of the people. That's right, because he can hold up that with Adam Van Couverden, another liberal loser who's helped destroy Canada. So Adam Van Couverden here gets questioned by Ezra Levant. Listen to this. He doesn't even know how to answer these questions.
Are you worried about the Chinese connection with Paul Chang? Like, it sort of shines a spotlight on Mark Carney's connections with China and the fact we still don't know who the 11 MPs were. How do you feel about standing with Paul Chang after his outlandish comments?
I feel very confident in the future of the Liberal Party under the leadership of Mark Carney.
But what about the Chinese connection, though?
If you'd allow me to finish, Ezra, I'm very, very confident in the confidence that Canada has put in Mark Carney, and I'm very, very confident that Paul Chang has been accountable for his comments.
How has he been accountable?
With his words and with his comments. Anyways.
That's enough for you? Just like saying sorry and he can still stay?
That's absolutely preposterous. Then we could just start putting a bounty on anyone's head we don't like. Is that how we're going to run our country? And apologizing, that just clears everything up? So we're just throwing out the rule of law completely now.
Called for a man to be kidnapped.
Look, it wasn't something that I said, Ezra, and I think the Prime Minister said it best. It's a moment that we can all learn from. Thanks for your question.
But what's the lesson that we've learned?
Thanks, Ezra.
Thank you.
No, at the very least, he needs to be thrown out of the race. He can't be a Liberal MP, and he should be charged for doing that.
Who is that guy?
It's funny she asked, who is that guy? And here's Mark Carney trying to stir up more fear in the Canadian public with the big bad boogeyman.
We also have to stand up directly to a man named Donald Trump. Yeah. A man who, don't blame you. Don't blame him. No, a man who wants to break us so America can own us. That is the strategy. No, and that is never, ever going to happen. And I made that clear to him when we spoke.
Yeah, because we're going to get owned by China because of this guy.
A few days ago.
This guy's already compromised. Who's going to stand up to Xi Jinping? Exactly. Not Carney. That was clear today when he let Chang stay their candidate. Says that China owned a sycophant. Yeah, we got this clip coming from Daisy Media here, just showing the comparison. So, copyright music, we'll just turn off. But yeah, Mark Carney, he packed a bar. Don't believe the polls. Here's a shocker. Jagmeet Singh coming out saying that he's going to be axing the carbon tax now. You can't make this stuff up.
Here is just some of the first steps that we would take as a new Democrat government. We would remove the carbon tax, the consumer carbon tax, and take off that burden from everyday families.
Sorry, take off that what? That burden? Is that what you said? I thought 8 out of 10 Canadians got more back. You supported Justin Trudeau and the Liberals for years on this. Now it's a burden because it's not good for them in the polls. That's right. Jumping over to the Paul Chang situation. This is blowing up and actually going into mainstream media now. I jumped on this the second this dropped a couple days ago, and it's taken 2.5 days now. The media are finally talking about this. But first, we've got Jagmeet Singh grilling Mark Carney.
Paul Chang told a group of supporters that they should collect a bounty on the head of his conservative candidate. That is chilling to hear. That is scary to hear that. And in the context where there are many Canadians living in our country that left behind oppressive governments, oppressive regimes to come to a democratic nation where they could be free. And they came here hoping they could express their thoughts, criticize maybe what's going on in their countries of origin and say, What's going on is wrong. Human rights violations are wrong. And people come to this country and continue to face harassment, intimidation. People from South Asian communities, Iranian communities, people from China are constantly living in the ongoing fear that they're being harassed, they're being threatened, their families are being threatened. And to hear a candidate for the Liberal Party effectively say, go out and get the bounty on my opponent's head, it is really scary to hear that. For those folks, it's
That's beyond harassment or threats. That's like another 3 or 4 or 5 levels above that.
really disturbing. And for Mark Carney to say that I'm going to accept this candidate really sends a message that that type of commentary ultimately is acceptable because he's not removing him as a candidate. Ultimately saying that for the folks out there that are worried and afraid, folks that are living with that constant fear, you know what? You're less important to me. What's more important to me is my party. Putting his party ahead of his country in that case. I think that's wrong.
Jagmeet's a sellout, but this message can only help to try pull some of the Liberals back to the NDP and bring the Liberals' numbers down.
I think Canadians should find that wrong as well.
Yes, Canadians do find that wrong. And if they don't, they need to get their head out of the sand. So on mainstream media now, CTV, listen to this. So Dan Moulton, Liberal Party panelist, stated his position on the Paul Chang scandal.
Say an apology is enough. Clearly they're sorry and we're going to move past. In this case, they've clearly said, okay, he's apologized. It was a reprehensible comment. We don't obviously support it, don't agree with it, but an apology is going to suffice here and we're going to be able to move past this.
No, Dan Moulton from Crestview Strategy, apology is not enough. Otherwise, why don't we just put a bounty on your head and see how you feel? It's deplorable. The guy needs to at the very least be removed as an MP and be replaced with another candidate. These little Liberal guys are so weak. If they had that bounty on their head, they would not think the same thing.
Kathleen mentions Wednesday of this week is sort of a reasonable timeline that they have to make that call. I frankly, first of all, I don't think it'll be in the news tomorrow. I think this will move out of the cycle pretty quickly. I think we've reached peak of this story. And the reality is on Wednesday, our news cycle is going to be dominated with far more pressing matters regarding tariffs from the U.S. White House.
Sure.
And so I think just the reality of the political news cycle here, this is going to have run its course. They've decided an apology is enough and they'll move past it pretty quickly. And I think
Weak Liberal man right there.
it's the strategic decision they've made to not give this story any more oxygen by firing the guy.
Mark Carney's going to have to answer for this every single day until he fires Paul Chang. It's sticking around. Yeah, it is. This story's not going anywhere. Whether the topic goes away depends on the Liberals. Anyone can bring up the topic at any time. Exactly, until he fires Paul Chang. Bet this don't age well. Yeah, elbows down to China. Meanwhile, we've got Pierre here absolutely blasting Mark Carney and this whole situation.
Your reaction, have you spoken to Joe Tay and how's he feeling?
Well, it is a teachable moment. It teaches us that Mark Carney will never stand up for Canada. He is keeping on a Liberal candidate who said that people should turn over the Conservative candidate to a bounty by the Chinese government, which wants to kill him. The Chinese government wants to literally kill Joe Tay because he's a political dissident. And this candidate said that that should happen. Mark Carney keeps that candidate on his roster to be in Parliament. It shows that Carney is more interested in pleasing Beijing because they lent him $250 million for his company. He is compromised. I have never in my life seen a prime minister unwilling to protect a Canadian citizen against a foreign government that wants to take his life through a bounty. If Mark Carney won't stand up for a Canadian against this foreign hostile regime now, how could we ever expect him to stand up for Canada after the election?
Really, when we think about it, Mark Carney's barely Canadian. He hasn't been here for a majority of his life. He shows up to be prime minister. He doesn't give a crap about what's going on. This is all an agenda that he's rolling out to get rich for money and power. China's pulling the strings here, and Mark Carney is Xi Jinping's commander.
I have spoken to Joe Tay. Yesterday, I spoke to him. He's very, very rattled. This is not, let's be clear, this is not about an inappropriate or off-color joke. These comments by this Liberal candidate may well rise to the level of criminal because they called for someone to be turned over to a hostile foreign government on a bounty, a government that wants to kill this Canadian citizen. And Mr. Joe Tay is extremely afraid. He's afraid for his life. I think he is probably rattled by the fact that the Prime Minister of Canada is siding with a Liberal MP who has made these horrific and dangerous comments against a Canadian citizen, against the life of a fellow Canadian citizen.
Yeah. That's straight to the point. This is the story of the election. This is it. If this heats up any further, it could tear Canada apart. These are very serious matters. Might even attract some attention from outside leaders. Carney's compromised and conflicted. I mean, he is. Look at this. So Andrew Scheer posting this one. Why won't Carney fire his candidate who called a Canadian citizen to be handed over? Maybe it's because his conflicts of interest. Listen to these words. This sums it up.
The momentum behind this agenda is now tremendous, and it'll be important that China is center stage to shape this new global, sustainable financial system.
There it is, his net zero agenda. China is the centerpiece to this. I already showed this clip yesterday, but Marty up north posting this saying, no surprise here, Carney can't disqualify Paul Chang because he's one of the 11 MPs on the interference report. So this is speculation, obviously, but interesting because this is quite possibly true. Chang has so much dirt on the Liberals that he's blackmailing Carney. We're witnessing corruption right before our eyes. That is an interesting theory, and maybe that's why he doesn't fire him. That really seems plausible. Xi Jinping could be saying, don't you dare touch that guy. We worked really hard in our interference to get him there. There's no way you're firing him. We're used to corruption. This is treason. All Canadians are questioning the Hogue report. Hogue having ties to China too. We got Mark Carney here with his I admire China's basic dictatorship moment, like Justin Trudeau had.
One of the many strengths of China is their perspective, their medium long-term perspective. This is an ambitious G20. It's an ambitious Chinese leadership.
Their perspective, their ambitious leadership. This sounds just like Justin Trudeau. These guys are the same. They're all working for China, and Canadians are getting duped by this. A lot of older voters and a lot of women in the country are falling for this stuff. Going to get controlled by China. Don't think they want that. Moving ahead, we've got Melissa Lantzman on Vassie's show talking about this.
The apology is sincere, and that there should be some credence given to that. Is that not possible?
No, what Mr. Roberts just said is that we should focus on other things, that parties are making a big deal out of this. Canadians should take this seriously. It is a dangerous, dangerous thing to suggest that you should take a bounty out on another Canadian citizen, threaten their lives. This is completely disqualifying. And it actually speaks to Mark Carney's judgment. If Mark Carney can't stand up to Paul Chang, how is Mark Carney going to stand up for any Canadian? If this is what's allowed in their caucus, when a man's life is already threatened and somebody goes out and says, why don't you turn over this guy to the regime's consulate here, Beijing's consulate here in Toronto for cash. Why don't you kidnap him and take him there? That is a disqualifying statement for any individual, but particularly for a sitting MP.
And I certainly would not take away from the seriousness of what you just said, but your party isn't also a stranger to candidates that make statements or that appear in pictures that they shouldn't, and you don't automatically give them the boot if they recognize that.
Name one that's equally or even remotely as close, though. If you think about it from the lens of Xi Jinping controlling the situation and doesn't want Paul Chang out because they worked hard to get him there. Is there dirt on Mark Carney? Is Xi Jinping saying, don't you dare? I don't know.
Recognize that there was an issue. Is it not possible that he made a very bad mistake?
This is somebody who is encouraging Canadians to kidnap somebody and turn them over to a hostile regime.
So there's no room for
There's absolutely no room for an apology here. This requires either a resignation, or what it actually requires is for Mark Carney to make a decision, to stand up to Paul Chang, to tell him that he's out of line, to fire him as a candidate, and to make sure that the Canadians feel safe.
And that's just it. If this happened to anyone else, they would want some sort of action to be taken. Joe Tay's sitting there wondering if he steps out the door, if people are going to run and throw a burlap sack over his head and drag him down to the Beijing consulate. The apology is being justified by multiple people now from the lens of someone who's not being targeted. Mark Carney doesn't have character. He's an evil globalist traitor. Yeah. Mainstream media has lost their moral compass. I mean, ever since they brought on their fact checker, who didn't go on this week, I guess next week, it's just absurd. CTV is absurd. This was brought up today at this panel here. They're announcing that there's no foreign interference, but then they're questioned about it, and like, well,
of this controversy, and do you consider it, for example, transnational repression?
So we're aware of the comments made, and I would say the comments don't fall under the mandate of the panel. The bounty against the other person is an example of transnational repression. The panel and site are monitoring as it relates to the bounty. I will note that the Minister of Foreign Affairs in December 2024 issued a statement deploring Hong Kong's decision to place bounties on the heads of democratic activists, including 2 Canadians. And GAC remains in touch with the 2 Canadians to provide them updates and offer support.
This panel here was coming out and just saying there's no foreign interference thus far in our election process. But as they answered there, well, There is. Foreign interference only matters to Carney when it helps him steal a seat. Yeah, no kidding. Yet the PM keeps him on unbelievable. In my view, Carney is a traitor. I mean, our government is full of unbelievable weak losers. I've said it a million times. And they're all the ones in power. And jump over to this 4 panel here. We've got this NDP, the one who had like a complete meltdown talking about her womb and whatever. She's a nutcase. We've got Gregor Robertson, former mayor of Vancouver. This guy allowed all the money laundering to flow in. They bring in the best of the best on here, don't they?
I do have a number of questions on policy in the policy pitches today. But first, Mr. Robertson, I do have to ask you about the sort of big story emerging today politically. I know that it's ultimately not your decision whether or not Mr. Chang stays or goes. But given what we know now about what he said, despite the fact that he's apologized, but what he said about his then conservative rival, are you comfortable with Mr. Chang also remaining as a Liberal candidate?
Well, first and foremost, I'll just say his comments were absolutely unacceptable, I think, to all of us that are his colleagues. And he has apologized. He's taken responsibility for those comments. So I think we all agree, as Mark Carney has expressed, that he continues. But obviously that apology and responsibility are absolutely critical to this because his comments were totally unacceptable.
So should we be calling for a bounty for Gregor Robertson's head too? If that's how this country works now, we call for it on anyone. And if you get called out, oops, sorry, I didn't mean it. No harm, no foul, right? Just that awful feeling in your stomach thinking people are going to come nab you in the night.
But if they were totally unacceptable, and if your party was sincerely recognizing the severity of making a comment about someone who actually does have a bounty on them, would there not be a more pronounced consequence for that? Like, I don't understand how, a country like China, where 4 Canadians were executed, where the Michaels were detained for over 1,000 days, like how that is not taken more seriously by your party.
Well, I think it is taken seriously because if he had not taken responsibility for his comments and agreed that they were absolutely unacceptable, then this would not be happening. He would not be continuing. So he's taken that responsibility, apologized directly, and that's what counts here.
No, if they were unacceptable, he would get fired and removed from the party. He would not be a candidate anymore. There's no punishment to his crime.
Making sure that those comments have been pulled back, apologized for, and he's being held accountable for that.
What a bunch of horse crap answer that is. He's talking responsibility for comments by acknowledging them. That's it. Exactly. Liberal Party is cooked. So acceptable. Basically, it's acceptable because there's no punishment, just like anything else. That's why the bank robbers and the home invaders, they get away with everything. Teachable moment. So as this guy says here, this isn't just an off-the-cuff vulgar comment that most everyone gets caught in. Chang literally encouraged kidnapping at the very least in exchange for money. This is a crime. Exactly. He should be charged for it. At the very least, he needs to be tossed out of this election race. As we're seeing here day after day, Pierre Poilievre fill in big venues. Mark Carney can barely fill a pub. I'll believe the polls once Mark Carney fills a venue with 5,000 people.